But Niki and Lynn, the team's de facto leaders, had known better than to buy into all that sanctimonious, head-swelling hype. It was the underdogs who were blessed with the advantage, with the mental edge in sports. Niki tried to counsel her teammates then, because the underdogs were almost always hungriest and played with the least amount of pressure. But her advice, and the goals she scored almost single-handedly, hadn't been enough. It was in that moment, when the silver medal was draped around her neck, that Niki knew it was time to hang up her skates, because she too had ultimately come up short in matching the Americans' desire to win. She'd given it everything, and it hadn't been enough. The wanting was there, but the result wasn't. Ultimately, she'd failed her team, failed herself, and knew that as a player, it would be impossible to want and to come close to achieving anything like that again. When you tried your best but couldn't quite reach the top of the mountain, there came a time when there was nothing left but to turn around and go back down. Niki swallowed, deciding it was too long ago and too painful to dredge up their playing days. Little could come of this little stroll down memory lane. Speaking of the Olympics, congratulations, by the way. Thanks, Lynn said, whistling under her breath. She would be the assistant coach for Team Canada's entry into the Vancouver Olympics 6 months from now. But there was a current of worry in her voice and the way she was shuffling her feet. I don't know, Nick. There's nothing not to know. You're up to it. They wouldn't have picked you otherwise. Niki was deeply familiar with the pressures Lynn faced because she had been an assistant coach to the national team in the 2006 Olympic Games in Turin, Italy, where Canada had claimed gold against the Americans, exactly as they'd done in Salt Lake in '02. But the golden glow was short-lived. 6 weeks later, her wife Shannon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and given only months to live. Niki had not coached a game of hockey since. It's not that, Nick, but thank you for your confidence. No, it wouldn't be a lack of confidence, not with Lynn. Lynn was capable, was brutally ruthless at times, or at least when it came to winning. She wasn't afraid of making decisions, wasn't afraid of doing whatever was required. A bull in a china shop as both a player and a coach. Got time for a walk? Lynn asked with a hopeful lilt to her voice. Of course. Anyone who traveled the 4 hours down the clogged Highway 401 from Toronto to the University of Windsor campus deserved a few minutes of her time. Curriculum be damned. And for Lynn to show up unannounced after all these years, well, whatever she wanted to talk about had to be important. The campus was deserted, as it would remain until the semester started. It took only minutes for Niki and Lynn to reach the Detroit River and the meandering paved walking path along its shore. Summer still hung hot and humid in the air, autumn giving no hint that it was poised to take over. But that would change in a few weeks, when the leaves would begin their costume change and a damp chill would deepen its claim on the days. Not that I pretend to know much about it, but I guess you're getting ready for the new semester? Lynn said. She'd never gone to college or university. Right out of high school, she had joined the Professional Women's Hockey League, the National Women's Hockey League. The professional part was a joke, though, because it only paid a few $100s a month. Lynn had slogged in a factory making bicycle parts to augment her income, then made the transition to coaching in the same league a few years ago. It was a big step for her to join Hockey Canada's coaching ranks, just as it had been for Niki 4 years ago. You'd think I'd have the curriculum down cold after all these years, but I like to tear it down and rebuild it every year. Lynn laughed. You would. Biggest perfectionist I've ever seen. Niki taught sports management in the university's business school. Her classes were popular, especially with professional and semi-professional sports becoming bigger and bigger business in North America. And, yeah, she was a taskmaster as a teacher, expecting her students to exhibit the kind of drive and ambition they'd need to get ahead in their work life. Schools were insular, protective. The real world, whether it was business or sports,